Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the dim light of dawn, a solitary figure emerged from the shadows of the tall pines lining the edge of Woodlawn Park. The serene surroundings, vibrant wildflowers, and the faint aroma of damp earth belied the violence that would soon envelop this quiet community. A shrill scream pierced the morning air, gut-wrenching in its rawness and urgency. Neighbors had grown accustomed to the tranquility of their small town, where everyone knew one another by name. However, the residents of Eldridge never anticipated that their lives would forever be altered by the discovery of a body only footsteps away from their homes. The victim was a local art teacher, Rebecca Lawson, well loved for her passion for creativity and her dedication to the children of Eldridge. It was difficult to reconcile the cheerful presence of the woman who inspired budding artists with the chilling reality of her lifeless form, sprawled alongside a weathered oak tree, bruised and battered. As authorities arrived at the scene, a wave of dread swept through the community. The splashes of blood on splintered bark told a harrowing tale of violence, igniting questions that would haunt the townspeople for months to come. Who could have inflicted such horror on one of their own? Was a murderer roaming amongst them under the cover of night? Investigators, fueled by a mix of urgency and dread, began combing through the park, piecing together the fragments of that fateful morning, unaware that this case would soon unravel dark secrets and hidden motives. The search for justice would lead them down a winding path, revealing more about themselves and their seemingly peaceful town than they could ever imagine. The victim, Rebecca Lawson, was no ordinary art teacher. She was a beacon of hope in a world often overshadowed by monotony. Born and raised in Eldridge, her roots ran deep in the soil of this small town, where every corner held a cherished memory. Rebecca's laughter often echoed through the halls of Eldridge Middle School, spilling into the bright, color-splashed walls of her classroom, a sanctuary filled with canvas, clay, and unbridled imagination. As detectives delved into her background, they uncovered a woman who not only taught art but lived it. After completing her degree in fine arts, Rebecca returned home, dreaming of inspiring children to see beauty in the mundane. Her passion extended beyond the classroom. She organized community art festivals and wielded a paintbrush on weekends to beautify local parks. Eldridge was, in many ways, a canvas of her making. But as the investigation unfurled, they learned that Rebecca's life was not without its layers of complexity. A few co-workers described her as fiercely independent, yet quietly vulnerable. Some noticed late-night phone calls that often left her agitated, a sharp contrast to her usual demeanor. A few whispers of a tumultuous romantic relationship surfaced, darkening the portrait of a woman who, beneath her vibrant exterior, battled personal demons. As the community mourned, more layers peeled away, revealing a hidden realm of social media intrigue and tumultuous friendships. A life lived in color hid shadows that encroached upon Rebecca's narrative. Unseen by those who adored, who had she fought with? What had she kept concealed? And who had dared to pull her paintbrush from her hand in such a violent manner? The answers lay tangled in the aftermath of her murder, waiting to be revealed. The crime scene. The morning sun reigned over Woodlawn Park as detectives cordoned off the area, transforming the once serene landscape into a theater of horror. Crime scene tape fluttered in the light breeze, billowing like a grim banner marking the nexus between life and death. The air, once laced with the crisp scents of pine and dew, now carried an omnipresent tension, saturated with the acrid tang of regret and disbelief. Detective Mark Jensen, a seasoned investigator with a penchant for detail, knelt by the body of Rebecca Lawson. Dressed in her signature flowing skirt and paint-speckled top, she lay amidst scattered wildflowers, her broken form stark against nature's beauty. The sight was heartbreaking. The vibrant colors that had once filled her life in every stroke of her brush now lay muted in a theater of violence. Jensen observed the scene with a practiced gaze. Blood pooled around her head, marred by the reality of a life brutally extinguished. It was evident she had fought back. A few scratches adorned her arms, revealing a struggle against an unknown assailant. Nearby, the discarded remnants of a makeshift painting palette lay trampled beneath the weight of the investigation, suggesting she had been attacked while pursuing her passion. Forensic specialists swept through the area, combing the grass for any vital evidence. A broken bracelet glinted in the sunlight, partially buried in the soil. And Jensen wondered about the story it held. Would it lead to Rebecca's murderer? The detectives began to speak with those present when the scream had erupted. Early morning joggers, and even a couple walking their dog. Each witness bore a unique perspective, interwoven into the tapestry of horror that enveloped the park. But despite their common goal, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Trust now seemed a luxury in Eldridge, and the question loomed over everyone like a specter. Could the killer still be among them? The early investigation. In the following days, the once close-knit community of Eldridge struggled to process the violence that had shattered their tranquility. An air of suspicion seeped into neighborly exchanges. Coffee shop conversations buzzed with speculation, and glances darted away from strangers. The local police department, grappling to contain the rising tension, formed an investigative task force that worked around the clock, determined to bring justice to a grief-stricken town. Detective Mark Jensen, flanked by his partner, Officer Sarah McBride, sifted through Rebecca's life like a sculptor carving away rough stone to reveal the form within. They started where any investigation begins, interviewing family and friends, hoping for insight into the victim's relationships. Rebecca's sister, Emily, sat at the kitchen table, her mascara smudged from crying. She was always so vibrant and alive, but there were shadows. She confessed, her voice quivering. She mentioned feeling uneasy. Sometimes she said she was scared. Jensen took note, pressing her gently for details. As they dug deeper, the detectives uncovered stories of turbulent friendships and complex love interests. Rebecca's most recent relationship with fellow artist Dylan Torres had ignited heated conversations. Some sources claimed their romance was toxic, marked by arguments about jealousy and trust. McBride noted the caustic undertones in the accounts of their friends, who recounted hearsay over drinks, the drama unfolding like a slow-burning flame. But as they combed through social media and reviewed Rebecca's last messages, a troubling picture began to emerge. An anonymous online stalker had been harassing her for weeks, sending unsettling messages that danced around threats and personal information. The fear it entrenched in Rebecca's life added a chilling dimension to the investigation, a rabbit hole that could lead them deeper into her past, and ultimately closer to justice. Frustrations mounted as leads ran cold, and frustration swallowed hope. The morning joggers and amateur detectives in town whispered questions, but found no answers. As Eldridge clung to its memories of Rebecca, the clock continued ticking each passing moment, a reminder that the killer remained at large, hidden in plain sight. The dead ends. Days turned into weeks, and with each tick of the clock, Eldridge's anxiety swelled. Detective Jensen and Officer McBride found themselves ensnared in a tangled web of rumors and half-truths, investigating leads that dissolved into dead ends like mist in the morning sun. They pored over surveillance footage, interviewed countless acquaintances, and scoured social media for clues, only to be met with evasion and uncertainty. 1 week into the investigation, they focused on Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, Kyle Ashworth, a timid artist with an unassuming demeanor who had been seen near the park that fateful night. When they approached him, he seemed genuinely shaken. "I broke up with Rebecca months ago. I never wanted to hurt her," he stammered, his eyes wide and sincere, spilling forth a tale that painted him as a distraught lover rather than a cold-blooded killer. His alibi was solid. I had been attending an art exhibit on the other side of town, confirmed by numerous witnesses. Next, they turned to Dylan Torres, who had a more erratic reputation. He had been aggressive and vocally jealous, known for his explosive temperament during moments of frustration in the local art community. A few interviews later, however, revealed a softer side when friends spoke of his devotion to Rebecca, clouded by passion. He claimed he had been at home painting that evening, revealing only vague details behind a closed door. Days turned to weeks, and the shadows of doubt hanging over the town grew heavier. The detectives chased down tips from floral arrangements and leftovers from a dinner party. But as every expert would remind them, chasing shadows seldom yielded results. Frustrations bubbled over in the squad room as leads drifted into the ether, and the case, once brimming with promise, teetered perilously close to stagnation. In the quiet of the precinct, Jensen and McBride exchanged grim glances, acknowledging the growing unease within their team. The darkness wrapped around them like a cloak, obscuring the path ahead, but they would not back down. They understood that sometimes justice required patience, requiring them to sift through the rubble, to discover the truth, a truth they knew was lurking just beyond their reach, waiting patiently to be unearthed. A break in the case. Just when the shadows of hopelessness seemed insurmountable, a fresh voice emerged from the depths of the investigation. It came in the form of a tipster, a single mother named Clara, who frequented Woodlawn Park with her young daughter. Only weeks after Rebecca's tragic death, she approached the precinct, her brow furrowed with unease. "I saw someone that night," Clara conveyed, her small frame trembling as she recalled the events of that fateful evening. "I thought it was a couple arguing, at first a man and a woman. But as I got closer, something about their words made me stop." Jensen, intrigued, leaned forward, edging the conversation along. "What did you hear?" Clara hesitated, flashes of panic flickering in her eyes. "I didn't hear much, but I heard her scream. I instinctively pulled my daughter to the ground and left quickly. I didn't want her to see or hear what could happen next. But something about the guy seemed familiar," she managed, her voice trembling. Clara described a man with shaggy hair and a distinct tattoo on his forearm, a swirling design that echoed the motifs found in local art exhibit. With a surge of renewed hope, Jensen and McBride carefully dug through the stacks of their previous interviews, searching for someone who matched Clara's description. Days later, a familiar name popped up: Dylan Torres, Rebecca's volatile ex. The descriptions of both his appearance and his elusive tattoo combined in a perfect storm of suspicion. Jensen reached out to local tattoo parlors to verify their records, which ultimately led them to an address linked to Dylan. Armed with a search warrant, the detectives made their way to his small, cluttered apartment. Dread buzzed in the air as they prepared for the possibility of confrontation. As they entered, the familiar smell of paint lingered, and the interior resembled a chaotic art studio filled with half-finished canvases. But what turned their attention was an unfinished painting sprawled across an easel, a visceral portrayal of anguish and loss that sent chills down their spines. As they examined the space, a speck of red caught Jensen's eye, glimmering under the light. It was paint mixed with something dark and foreboding. Could it be evidence tying him to the crime scene? The tension swelled, and they steeled themselves for whatever revelations lay ahead. As the pieces began to converge, hope fluttered within the investigators, hinting at a truth they had long sought. The suspect, Dylan Torres, sat in the small interrogation room, his fingers nervously tapping against the table as he awaited the detectives. His eyes darted, searching for details in the stark, gray concrete walls, while the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unyielding glare. The tension in the air was palpable. The weight of the investigation bore down on him like an anchor. Detective Jensen entered first, the faint sound of his footsteps echoing ominously. McBride followed closely, her arms crossed, a storm brewing in her expression. They presented themselves like two sides of a coin, calculated and imposing, yet ready to offer a sliver of understanding if he would only meet them halfway. Dylan, Jensen began, his tone steady but firm. "We'd like to talk about Rebecca Lawson." The mention of her name twisted Dylan's features. His jaw clenched, and for a moment, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his rugged face. "What about her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, which did little to mask the underlying edge of defensiveness. "Several witnesses recall you being near the park that night." "You were seen arguing with her," McBride interjected, her sharp gaze piercing through his facade. "And we found something in your apartment that ties you directly to the altercation." Dylan's pulse quickened, and a flash of panic ignited behind his eyes. He hesitated, collecting his thoughts, the silence amplifying the tension in the room. "Yeah, we had our problems, but I loved her. I would never hurt Rebecca." Jensen leaned in, his voice dropping to a more conspiratorial tone. "Dylan, evidence shows inconsistencies in your alibi. You were seen exiting a nearby bar after drinking heavily, and then you suddenly vanished that night. What happened after you left her?" Dylan swallowed hard, guilt creeping upon him, a tempest of emotions roiling beneath the surface. "It wasn't like that," he finally burst out, his anger flaring, a facade of bravado slipping. "She didn't understand. We fought, but I left. I had too much to drink," he admitted, his voice shaking. "Then why were you so desperate to erase the evidence?" McBride probed, producing a photo of the unfinished canvas they'd found in his apartment. It depicted a scene bearing a striking resemblance to the park, and bore splatters of what appeared to be blood. "This paints a much different picture, Dylan. You need to tell us the truth." As he stared at the artwork, the room fell into a tense silence, Somewhere deep within, the struggle between rage and remorse materialized in his eyes. The walls may have echoed with accusations, but the pressure was mounting. Would he crack under the weight of the truth, or would he continue to weave his tangled web of lies? The unraveling was imminent, and one pivotal question lingered. How far was he willing to go to protect himself? The trial. The courthouse stood stoic, its stone facade a monument to justice and scrutiny. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with a weighty anticipation, filled with whispers and murmurs of the townspeople who had gathered to witness the trial of Dylan Torres. The air felt thick, as if it vibrated with collective fear and hope, all focused on the fate of a man accused of a crime that had shattered their serene community. Detective Jensen and Officer McBride sat near the front, their presence a silent reminder of the unraveling that had come before, the tireless investigation that led them to this moment. McBride's expression was resolute, the exhaustion of the arduous case evident in her furrowed brow. She had not only focused on the facts, but had become an advocate for Rebecca Lawson, determined to honor her memory. The trial commenced, the judge presiding with an air of authority. As evidence was laid bare, the courtroom saw a stark portrait of the tumultuous relationship between Dylan and Rebecca. The prosecution painted a narrative filled with love, jealousy, and ultimately tragedy, weaving testimonies from friends, family, and Curtis, a nearby bartender who claimed to have seen Dylan leave the bar the night of the murder, reeking of alcohol and anger. Each piece of evidence connected Dylan to the scene, fragments of his alibi chipping away under the scrutiny of the court. Yet, Dylan's defense painted a different picture, a dim portrayal of a man trapped by circumstance, juxtaposed against the idyllic landscape of small-town life. His attorney argued for doubt, emphasizing the lack of direct evidence linking him to the scene of the crime. "You must consider the real possibility that someone else could have committed this act," he proclaimed, desperate to sow the seeds of uncertainty. As the testimonies unfolded, the courtroom wasn't merely a place for justice. It stirred a cauldron of emotion. Clara, the witness who had initially approached the detectives, took the stand and recounted the fateful night with jittery hands and misty eyes. Her recounting sparked a renewed wave of sympathy for a Rebeccan artist with dreams now extinguished before their time. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, igniting whispers of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. By the time the verdict was to be announced, tension filled the room like a palpable presence. Would justice prevail, or would Dylan walk free on a flimsy tether of doubt? As the jury filed back into the courtroom, the judge donned a solemn expression, the weight of the impending decision heavy upon him. The world outside held its breath, waiting for the needle to drop, aware that fate would soon be cast. The echoes of the past had brought them to this pivotal moment, and the reverberations of their decision would be felt throughout Eldridge for years to come. The aftermath. When the verdict was finally read, a collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Dylan Torres, guilty of second-degree murder." The words hung in the air like an oppressive storm cloud, morphing the mix of fatigue and anguish, etched on every face into a mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but it came at a heart-wrenching cost. Outside, the town of Eldridge erupted into a flurry of whispered conversations, emotions clashing like the late afternoon thunder. Rebecca's family, huddled together, wept, clutching each other tightly. It was a bittersweet victory. They had won justice for Rebecca, but it felt hollow without her. Clara, standing a little ways off, felt the weight of her role in the trial. It had been her small act of bravery that tipped the scales, but she couldn't shake the guilt that settled in her heart. She had witnessed the darker side of human nature and felt an unsettling ripple of responsibility over Rebecca's fate. Detective Jensen and Officer McBride were met with a torrent of media questions as they stepped outside the courthouse. The case had drawn national attention, morphing into a cautionary tale about the risks faced by women in relationships marked by jealousy and control. Although they had worked tirelessly to see justice done, the weight of the story proved heavy. Jensen regarded his partner, recognizing the emotional toll this case had taken on them both. In the following weeks, the trembling roots of community began to heal, slowly stitching together the frayed threads of normalcy. Candlelight vigils were held at Woodlawn Park as town members gathered to honor Rebecca's memory, a celebration of her vibrant spirit and the lives she had touched. Art pieces created in her memory adorned the park, resilient reminders of the love she inspired in others. Yet, in the heart of Eldridge, a shadow lingered. Though Dylan was sentenced to prison, the haunting truth about human complexity resonated far beyond the courtroom. Friends and family found themselves grappling with uncomfortable discussions around toxic relationships and the masks people wear. It left an indelible mark, igniting conversations about emotional abuse that had lain dormant in their midst for too long. As the seasons changed, whispers of Rebecca's name transformed from horror to honor, breathing new life into the narrative left in her absence. Each brushstroke of her mural within the park reflected a message of hope that would inspire others to seek love rooted in respect rather than control. While justice had been served, the aftershocks of that fateful night would define Eldridge's future for years to come. Indeed, the echoes ran deeper, a resonating reminder of the fragility of life, the importance of compassion, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The road ahead remained uncertain, yet within that uncertainty lay the potential for healing in a town forever marked by tragedy. Reflection. In the weeks following the trial, Eldridge slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the scars remained vivid. Residents shuffled through their routines, yet the shadow of Rebecca Lawson's tragedy lingered, a ghostly reminder that life's fragility could shift in an instant. For many, the experience left behind more than grief. It birthed crucial conversations and a rekindled commitment to community. Detective Mark Jensen often found himself revisiting the park, coaxed by nostalgia and the responsibility lingering in his heart. Resilient splashes of color filled the walls of the park, each artwork a testament to Rebecca's spirited brushstroke, a silent plea for awareness and understanding about the quiet turmoil that lurks deep within personal relationships. As he sat on a bench, he observed children playing and artists sketching, vowing to protect their innocence and cultivate a safe space for expression and love. McBride, too, felt the transformation inside her. The case had not only heightened her sense of justice, but had ignited a passion within her to foster awareness surrounding emotional abuse. She began volunteering at local self-help organizations, providing resources and opportunities for survivors of toxic relationships. The seeds of change had been sown, and as she stood among those rallying for awareness, she felt connection, purpose, healing. As the leaves turned amber and began to fall, the community came together for an annual art festival, honoring Rebecca's life in a celebration of creativity and resilience. It reminded them that while they had lost a beloved friend, her legacy lived on in the stories they told, the conversations they initiated, and the lives they changed. In the aftermath of tragedy, Eldridge learned that brokenness is not just about suffering, but also about rebuilding, finding strength in vulnerability and wisdom in community. Though shadows still danced in the corners of their memories, the light of compassion propelled them forward, guiding them toward hope, understanding, and lasting change.